For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePoinsett. Welcome to the Blacktastic Adventure. I'm your host, Bruce Poinsett, and on today's episode, I speak with Gina DuQuenne. Gina DuQuenne is a native of Los Angeles, California, and moved to Ashland, Oregon in 2008. She is proud of her ancestors and gets her courage and strength from her great-grandmother. In 2010, she founded Southern Oregon Pride, and in 2020, she was elected the first African American lesbian to the Ashland City Council and the first in Southern Oregon. So I met Gina a couple months ago for the Ben Jonson Mountain renaming festivities in Jacksonville, Oregon. And, you know, it's funny, I connected with her from someone I actually interviewed for this project a little bit earlier, Vance from Base. He was just like, Bruce, you gotta meet this woman. Don't you know who she is? Don't you know who she is? And, you know, it's just one of those cases where someone's just like, they immediately, like, you know, the same way you say something pops off the page. Like when you first talk to them, it's like, oh man, this is, you know, obviously like he introduced her as like, yeah, this is the first Black city council person of Ashland. But, you know, Gina's just like, her energy just was immediately, like I said, just like radiated off her. And she just has this presence, and, you know, she just moves with, you know, just a sense of purpose and a sense of force. And I mean that in the best way possible. And, you know, I think that really comes out when you listen to her talk. So I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. Check it out. So Gina, thank you for being on the Blacktastic Adventure today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Bruce. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of like get right into, you know, kind of get right into your story. I know you're originally from Los Angeles, but you came to Ashland. Like, when did you first move to Ashland, and what brought you to Oregon?
You know, it's interesting that you would ask me that question, because when I told my family and my friends, you know, hey, I'm going to move to Oregon, to Ashland, Oregon, and they're like, what's in Oregon? There's no Black folks in Oregon. Well, now there's going to be, and especially in Southern Oregon, we are scarce, you know. I didn't realize how scarce until we moved here. But
About what year was that, out of curiosity?
We moved here in 2008. And, you know, just wanting to kind of move somewhere that wasn't so densely populated and kind of break out of where I'd been all of my life. And so for me to move here, it was a big thing, you know, born and raised in LA all of my life. So when we came here, I just really fell in love with it. My partner had been here many years before, you know, she brought me up here, but we were on our way to Seattle and we were driving. And it's like, hey, let's get off at exit 14. And we did. And drove through, and I love the architecture. I love the sweet little town. You know, it's 20, a little over 21,000 people. And so what I saw, I just really fell in love with. And then I wanted to come back and dig in a little deeper and see what Ashland had to offer. And I feel very, very grateful, and it's a saving grace that we have SOU here, Southern Oregon University, and that we have Oregon Shakespeare Festival here, because that brings a little bit of diversity. It brings a little bit of culture. And so that is kind of a saving grace here in Ashland, for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. You said you came at 2008, yes. You know, so that must have been, well, actually, before we get into kind of like the politics of the time, because I imagine coming there during, you know, like the Obama campaign must have been a particularly, interesting time. But one thing that, while we're still on just the landscape of Ashland, because I was down there, we met actually a couple months ago now. And, one of the things that kind of caught me was just like the one lane roads, really. Like that took, I don't think I'm used to it since I was only there for a weekend, but like, is that, for those who don't know, like Ashland has apparently, well, Southern Oregon seems to have like a lot of these, just like these old school one lane, like literally like not like two crossing paths, just one lane roads. I remember we had to do going up Ben Johnson Mountain, which we'll talk about a little bit more. You're driving up this mountain like 3 miles, no guardrails, no nothing, just looking over. Like that is treacherous. How long did it take you to kind of like get used to that coming from LA?
That was it's still a trip, and one of the big things for me coming from LA to here was there's no street lights, there's no neon lights, I mean, you're driving in the night. If you don't know where you're going, good luck. I was lost all the time. There's exit 19, exit 27. Don't you have a name of a street? What exit? What does that mean to me? In LA, you get off on Slauson, Crenshaw, there's names of streets. We don't have this exit thing going on. And, and driving down little rural roads and there's no lights. And so I drove around with my bright lights on for a long time. And if I had to go somewhere and I didn't know where I was going, I was one of these folks that would go in the daytime. So I know where I'm going to be. So I know how to get there. So I didn't kill any deer or people or, anything. And that's a trip too, deer and critters. You don't have that where I'm from.
Hmm. So yeah, talk about just kind of like the landscape, just kind of like the slower pace, especially with the lack of traffic, which is something I know a lot of people I've talked to in Southern Oregon, when they talk about just like what they love about just, yeah, not having to, be stuck in kind of these big traffic jams that we think of in the cities. But, the flip side of that is that, again, you moved there in 2008. So I'm curious, especially like as a Black lesbian woman, being in Southern Oregon at, when Barack Obama was running for president. Can you just talk about like sort of like the climate around sort of like the region at the time?
Well, it was interesting, Bruce, because when we moved here, I got here first. So President Obama had just won. So many white people approached me like, oh, this is wonderful. We've changed and the world is completely different now and it's acceptance and love. And I'm like, no, yeah, I'm glad and I'm grateful for that. And I hope he's not the last, but this is not the beginning of the end. And so many people, I felt like this is the beginning of something, and racism is gone and we have a Black president, the world is turning around. And I for one was surprised, and I prayed a lot because I didn't want anybody to kill our new president because people are crazy. And it was a surprise to me, the acceptance that I got. There was kind of unwanted acceptance, because it's very different coming from a big city and then coming to a small town. In a big city, everybody's doing their thing. We got places to go, people to see. And in Ashland, you cannot be anonymous when you're Black because you stick out. And I'm not exactly a wallflower, so I kind of stick out just because. And being here in that time was very interesting because it was attention that I didn't really necessarily want. I just landed. I'm trying to get my bearings and navigate this little bitty town. And, don't say this, because if you do, it echoes, it ripples, and everybody will know how you feel and what you're thinking. And so it was just, it was a very interesting time. And the way that this continues to play out, some people feel very, I don't know how to really put that, but let me say it like this, Bruce. I've never lived anywhere in my life where white people were so much wanting to um, educate themselves about our history. And for that, I will give them their props. However, I believe it becomes a time when you need to close the book and start to get into action. And there's not a lot of action. And I've ran into so many groups of well-intentioned people, white people who are reading books and white fragility and doing workbooks and workshops. And I've asked them, so how many Black people come and attend your meetings, and how many Black people do you speak to? Oh, we don't, no, we don't want, we don't want Black people to educate us. We've got this. I'm not here to educate you. I am here to have a conversation with you, because I am big on conversation. You can read a book all day long, but if you don't close the book and have a conversation and get to know each other, then what the heck's it all about?
Right, right. Like, if you're not building community, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious, is that, you talked about like it's impossible not to stand out as a Black person, down there. So was that kind of, you talked about kind of like just moving in, doing what most people do. It's like trying to get their bearings, just figure out the lay of the land and all that. But obviously you've since, been very, very active and, out there. And obviously the, first Black city councilor in Ashland. But, before that, you also created the Southern Oregon, or created the Southern Oregon Pride Festival. Can you just talk about the story of like how that came together?
Well, listening to you kind of recap like that made me think about coming to Ashland and meeting all these different people, and people I knew when we moved here in 2008 that there were queer people here, but nobody really got together and nobody really said anything, and everybody pretty much stayed to themselves. And in 2008, that's when Proposition 8 was in LA, was in California. And we were hoping that Proposition 8 would be turned. And so for equal rights for lesbians, or same-sex marriages, and equal rights. And so it didn't, it was defeated, because we were hoping that if it would have passed in California, then it would be on the ballot in Oregon and Washington, and could be a West Coast sweep. Well, it wasn't. And at Southern Oregon University, they have a queer resource center, and the queer resource center had these flyers, and they said, yeah, we're going to meet on the plaza, and we're going to yay, because everybody was hoping that Proposition 8 would have passed. And so I thought, I'm going to go to the plaza and see all of my people. And I went to the plaza, and it was probably about 8 people there. And I was like, where is everybody? And so that was really interesting. And I was telling my sweetheart and a couple of people that we were there with, I went over and I asked Janelle Wilson, she was with Queer Resource Center at that time, and I said, do we have a pride parade here, or do we have any place where queer folks just get together and gather, or do we have anything? And she told me that I think it was a couple of years prior to that, that a bunch of people got together and they marched down Main Street, on the sidewalk. And I said, so that was it? And she goes, oh yeah, and then we did something in Medford, and we all got together in Medford, and they had an event at the park, and apparently that was pretty well received, and that was good, but it wasn't on a yearly basis. It just kind of happened. And that's when I made up my mind, and I told my partner, I said, you know, we should do a pride parade. And I just had this thought. That was in 2008. And then in 2010, that's when we had our first Southern Oregon Pride Festival, our Pride Parade. And that the night before, we had a kickoff celebration that was off the hook. Our first Grand Marshal was, what the heck is his name? Well, his first name is Bob, and his husband and their two sons. They were our grand marshals, and it was so, it just blew me away, Bruce. I could not believe it. But let me tell you what happened before then. When I went to city council and I said I wanted to do this, first off, I went to the Chamber of Commerce because they have a 4th of July parade. So I said, how did you guys do that parade? And the lady there, very forthcoming, very nice. And she told me, boom, boom, boom. And I said, oh, okay. And she asked me why. And I said, because we're going to have a pride parade. And she's like, what's a pride parade? And I said, what's a pride parade? So anyway, I had to tell her what a pride parade was. And then when I told her, her expression kind of changed a little bit. And she said, we've never done that before. And before I told her my intention, she was very forthcoming. And then after I told her, she was like, oh. And when I went to city council and I went to Parks and Recs because we were going to use the band shell at the park, they were like, no. Nope, we don't do that. We've never done that. We don't. And well, everything new has never been done before, right? So we're going to do something new that's never been done before. And that was my first kind of introduction to local government. And it was, and it still is, no, we've never done that before. We don't do that. And so I am myself, and I just continue to be persistent and keep it moving. And even when getting the people who live here on board to be in the parade and march in the parade, people were so enthusiastic. People were excited. They came from Redding, California. They came from Wairika. They came from Salem, Eugene. I was just, whoa. Sisters, Oregon. I never even heard of a Sisters, Oregon. They came from everywhere to come to little bitty Ashland and descend on this community. And that was so fulfilling for me. And something that we wanted to do, we do what we call pride hopping, because I don't want to be responsible for anybody's drinking. So I'm like, go into all the bars and restaurants and drink to your heart's delight. And when I went to the bars and the restaurants and the retail stores and the bookstores, I'm like, everybody, come on, let's get on board and let's have some fun with this. A lot of people the first year, they didn't want our posters, they didn't want our flyers, they didn't want to get on board. And that really, I didn't get it, you know. And then I'll never forget the first parade that we had that day. I was, you know, walking with the parade to make sure we stayed in pace and keep people on check. And I would walk by shops and I would see their own makeshift Southern Oregon Pride, and we support Pride. And I was like, oh, okay, they get it now. You know, they saw the people coming, they felt the energy, and now everybody digs it. So Gina, we're gonna do this again, right? So it's now it's a good thing. It was then too. They just didn't know it.
Yeah, you're being very generous saying they saw the energy. The cynic in me says they saw the money, but
that too.
You know, but that's still, I mean, it's just, you know, there's all these constant examples of just, one, creating something that wasn't there, but then you talk about people coming from Northern California, people coming from Sisters, people coming from Salem, et cetera, et cetera. Just like how no one, if nothing else, could see, wait, this is an event. Wait, this is a tourist attraction. This is all these things. Like, why would we not do this? But,
And something that I did too, because you were down here, you got the feel of how small it is. And in June is typically Pride Month because of Stonewall in 1969. But here in Ashland, June is inundated with tourists and graduation from the university. And so there's so many things going on. And my background, my work history is in tour and travel. And so I thought, you know what, let's pick right before we start to go off season. I wanted to think of what would be a good month, and October is National Coming Out Month. So I thought, October, we will celebrate Pride in October. So the second weekend every year in October is Pride weekend.
oh,
Yeah, so we get a chance to celebrate twice. We do our little thing in June, but then we really celebrate in October.
that's what's up. And, I like what you said earlier about going to the city council and saying, we're doing this, not we would like to, or we're interested, can we, but just we're doing this. It's a subtle thing, but I feel like, especially in Oregon, like especially as Black people, we're very conditioned not to be assertive in these spaces when it comes to, advocacy, really. So yeah, it's just a refreshing part of the story that caught me. But yeah, can you just talk about, I guess, since you're talking about 2008, 2010, and these are pretty broad strokes, admittedly, I'm asking, but in terms of how, I guess you would say, if anything, like things have changed, whether it be Ashland or Southern Oregon, in terms of be it Black life, be it LGBTQ life in sort of both the city and the region. Because I've also, a lot of people say that Ashland is kind of tucked inside, this area with Medford and these other places that are not, and they're different. So yeah, I realize I packed a lot in that question, but does that all make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm going to kind of pull it apart a little bit because it's interesting. In Medford, probably in 2016, 15, they have a pear blossom parade. And we thought, Southern Oregon Pride, we thought, let's go and take part in these other people's parade. Actually, it was 2014. Let's take part in these other people's parades so that they'll know, hey, we have a parade too. So in Grants Pass, it is about 45 minutes north of Ashland. Grants Pass has a boat net parade. And so we thought, hey, we'll go join in their parade. Signed the application, filled it out. Sure, it was great fun. We did Portland's Pride Parade, great fun. They have a pear blossom parade here in Medford. So we thought, hey, we'll be in their parade. And they said there was no room in the parade. And they gave me back this in writing. And I was like, so did y'all run out of street or something? I don't get it. What do you mean there's no room? And so the lady gave me, she goes, oh, well, you can have a booth. And she sent me this application for a booth, told me I could call these other people. And I said, well, okay, we'll get a booth. Nope, all the booths are gone now. We don't have any booths. And just how my life works, that weekend, a couple of our friends who worked for Channel 5, which is NBC, they were here, news anchors, and we were eating. And I told Laura, hey, doesn't this sound crazy? And Laura said, Gina, do you have that letter? And I'm like, yeah, I got it. I gave it to Laura and she read it and she was blown away. And she asked if she could take it to her boss. And I said, sure, I don't want it. She took it to her boss. Her boss, they asked the Pear Blossom Parade about it. And this woman was interviewed, and I will never forget her expression when Laura asked her, how's the parade going? But, oh, it's going great. And she said, well, really? What about Southern Oregon Pride? They applied for the parade. That lady's face fell to the floor. And she turned white as that paper that Laura had in her hand. And she was like, oh, and she's backpedaling and tried to figure it out. Oh, it was hilarious. And it was great publicity for Pride that year. We had the ACLU down here. We had the Urban League down here from Portland. We were all over the newspapers. It was great publicity, and simply because they said no. And then after that blew up, like the next day, people reached out, Pear Blossom, and said, oh yes, we want you in the parade and all this other stuff. So they put us at the back of the parade. We were the last contingency, and we were right in front of St. Mary's School. And these people were holding on to their children like we were going to contaminate them or something. And it was just hilarious. We marched in that parade, and some of the people who were on the sidelines, they got up and marched with us. And that was just another proud moment. And that was only 4 years after the beginning of Southern Oregon Pride Festival. And I believe since 2010, I have seen more drag shows. Eugene has a Pride event. Salem has a Pride event. Sisters has a Pride event now. I have seen, now I don't know about Salem. I don't want to say that. I know Eugene does, Sisters does. Reading did for a little while, and then it fizzled away, but they come up and party with us in October, so I'm cool with that. But I've seen more drag shows than ever here in Ashland, Medford, Grants Pass. I am so excited when I see young people walking down the street, holding their partner's hands, being themselves, and most importantly, feeling safe. As a Black woman, as a lesbian, we need to feel safe.
Absolutely. So kind of taking it over to just like Black life in, Ashland, the region. One of the things I've kind of noticed in the recent years is kind of like the emergence of groups like BASE, like So Black, Truth and Reconciliation Council, et cetera, et cetera. Can you just talk about, I guess, how have you seen things kind of evolve or change as far as just like for Black communities, Black families, in the region?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That I have seen a change in that, Bruce. I really have. And because when I got here in 2008, there was nothing like what we have now. And I'm so proud of BASE and So Equity and So Black and Truth and Conciliation. I'm proud of these groups because this is a group of people who've come together collectively to make a difference. And I come from the place that you have to be seen. We, especially as Black people, we have to be seen. We have to put our faces out there. Like I said earlier, it's hard to be inconspicuous and be in the background when you're Black in Ashland. They see you, but do they see you? So we have to put ourselves out there and be seen. That's one reason why I ran for council. I want to see these groups branch out, young families, run for the school board. I want to see you on the school board. I want to see you at council. I want to see you. That was another reason for Southern Oregon Pride. We need to be seen. And if we don't create that table, build that table, and find our seats at that table, nobody else will.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to sound like a preacher, but I
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I just feel we have to we have to do it ourselves. And what I see that's happening right now, this is a wonderful opportunity for us as Black folks to really step it up. And here we are, and be persistent and push that envelope and don't ask, tell. This is the way it's going to be. And let me tell you why. Because for too long, it has been hard for us to find our space, where we are and where we are going, and it's hard to navigate that when you don't have that support. And because we have the support of these different groups, that means that us as Black people, we know that, okay, I know I can go here and I will be safe and I can find resource or direction. And that's what it's all about. And I feel it's very interesting as you get older. I feel kind of like an elder in the sense of knowing what I know, lived experiences, and to be able to help people to find their voice and say, yes, it's okay. It's okay. You go, all I can say is yes or no, and if they say no, then we go around this way. And I believe that we need to be there to hold each other up. And now that we have these certain groups here in the Rogue Valley holding each other up, and I love it. They're young, they're Black, they're proud, young, gifted, and Black. Don't get much better than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Recently, yeah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you recently, as Ashland did its is it first or second Juneteenth celebration last month?
Well, actually, Medford had its first Juneteenth celebration. Usually, what would happen in Ashland, Oregon Shakespeare Festival would have a Juneteenth celebration every year since I've been here. And no, I don't, yeah, I think since I've been here. And then because of the pandemic, Oregon Shakespeare Festival was dark. There's no plays, nothing's happening. Should we or should we not? And Base took this and drove it to this wonderful celebration that was in Medford. And they're going to do it again next year. And I felt really, really good about that, because people sometimes, I find, and this is, I guess, LA talking in me, that Ashland is here and Medford is here. We're 13 minutes away from each other. Come on, people. 13 minutes is going to the grocery store in LA. Come on. So we are right here next to each other. And I am glad that Base took this and they ran with it. It was a great celebration. One thing that did happen here in Ashland for the very first time, and I'm happy to see that it's going to happen again next year and all the other years after, is that City Hall and the other all state buildings in Ashland, they flew the Juneteenth flag. And I was like, whoa, I took a picture of it. I'm very proud of that. Very, very proud of that. And to be able to recognize that is a good thing. It's the beginning, but it's a good thing, because that is our emancipation. That's our independence. And so it's the beginning. And it was kind of low key because of the pandemic, but Juneteenth's coming around again next year.
Yep. And you talked earlier about Southern Oregon Pride kind of bringing in people from all these different places, and also you just having your professional background being in the tourism industry. Do you feel like things like the Juneteenth celebration in places like Medford, as well as like all those Ben Jonson Mountain activities in June, like do you feel like that has sort of a similar potential in terms of just bringing people to the Rogue Valley and these different places?
I do. I really do. And I was very grateful for the Oregon Black Pioneers or Black Oregon Pioneers, um, that they have brought attention to Ben Johnson's Mountain. And right after that, I believe everybody went to Coos Bay to memorialize a lynching of a young Black man in Coos Bay. And I things like this, these are historical moments for us. And I believe the more that we um, open up and educate people, because people in travel and tourism, people want to do something different. They want to go out and see something they haven't seen or experienced or even knew before. So to be able to shine light on this subject matter, and this is what happened, and it happened right here in Southern Oregon, that is something that I don't want it to be a missed opportunity. I want people to know and experience it and educate themselves. I really got a lot out of the renaming Ben Jonson Mountain.
Yeah. So speaking of history, we've been talking for a while now and kind of burying the lead in, as you being a history maker yourself. I mean, we've talked about some other ways you've made history, but specifically as the first Black city councilor in Ashland. So you, first off, you won election what year again?
I just won in 2020.
2020. Yeah, so yeah, it's very fresh. Can you just talk about, how the experience has been so far? Like what has surprised you most since you took office?
Oh, honey, I don't know how much time you have. What surprised me? It's just like there's never a dull moment. Let me put it like that. Um, One thing that I found interesting when I was running for city council is I wanted to go out and ask people questions. When I was running, we did this thing because it was a pandemic. I mean, we're right in the middle of the pandemic and you can't go around knock on doors. You can't really have town halls. And so my team was brilliant. So hats off to my team. And we did what we called a talk in the park. So we'd all gather at different parks here in Ashland, and people would come and they'd ask me questions, and I would tell them where I was coming from and what my platform is, and my intention, and my vision, and my hope for Ashland. And some people thought that, so Gina, are you running with this team on this side? Or are you running on this side? Because there are no D's and R's. There's no Democrat or Republican. It's bipartisan, nonpartisan. And so people would ask me, which group am I running with? And I would tell people, I'm not running with any group. I'm running on my own merits. When I win this, it'll be because of me and what I have done, not because I'm running with these people or these people over here. And it was the feedback that I got from that was some was really positive and some was like, really? Is she crazy? And I must brag for a minute, but I won big time, blew myself away. I was like, oh my God, it was like 76% of the vote I got.
Wow.
And I was so blown away with that. And something that being on city council, something that I find is people seem to resonate to me, and people will be very forthcoming with me, and they want change and they want to see a difference. And for that, I'm grateful, because if you don't change, then you don't grow. If you don't grow, you become extinct. And then just the other day, I was at a coffee house meeting a friend of mine, and this former council person, he comes up to me and he goes, Gina, you got to quit voting like so-and-so votes, like this other counselor votes. And I said, excuse me, are you trying to say that I don't have a brain of my own, a mind of my own? maybe he's voting like me. Have you ever thought about that? And let me tell you, there's been 3 or 4 times when I did not vote like him. So you need to check yourself. And that was like, when he said that, I really had to come back. I was at a coffee house. I had way too much coffee. But I'm like, no. So don't assume. Don't assume. And when people assume and they bring that to my attention, I love that. I just run with it. Because if you're wrong, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. So I had to definitely tell him he was wrong. And there's here in Ashland, honestly, I think there's a lot of people that are rooting for me because they do want change. And there's people who are not rooting for me and they just think that, you know, oh, well, she got it because of what she did for pride, or, you know, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Yeah, you know, I will represent you too, even when you don't want me to.
Yeah, so you talk about change. Like, as far as your priorities on the council, what would you say are, the things, like the top of the list of things you're fighting for with your seat?
Something that when I first got this seat, I was going to call up the newspaper and ask the tidings for my cut, because every time I saw the newspaper, I was on the front page. I'm like, hey, I'm going to print it right. I saw this front page article. DuQuenne says, walk the walk, talk the talk. I was like, oh, okay. I'm cool with that. And it's because a lot of people, you know, they come to Ashland and they think Ashland is one way. If you say you're going to be that way, then I'm going to hold you to it. Be that way. And it's not all that it seems to be up front. However, where I come from and who I am, if you say that's who you are, I'm going to hold you to it. We have, which I'm very proud of, our mayor put this together, Mayor Akins, and it's now come to fruition and it's real, and the ordinance passed. And we have a social equity and racial justice commission. And this commission is made up of citizens from Ashland. And once again, it gives people resources. And if you have grievances, if you were in a shop and you felt unsafe, or someone was throwing microaggressions, or that uncomfortable, situation that actually happened to a friend of mine, and her daughter was in a store downtown and they were following her around, and she was just like, what? The little girl just stops and she's what? And they said that she acts suspicious. How do you act suspicious when you're a little kid, you know? And her mom told me, and I was like, And the person who owned the store, she fired that person. Okay. So that person took their microaggressions and their biases with them to another store somewhere.
Of course.
Rather than to take that opportunity and use it as a teaching moment and say, and I wish that people would take this, and that owner of the store use that as a teachable moment to send this woman to some type of course and training where she could get in touch with her biases, because she's the same person. She just took it somewhere else. And meanwhile, the mom, she came to me, but where are our community resources? And now we have them, not just in this commission that the city has put together, but also in BASE and So Black and So Equity. So, it's there, and I'm grateful that it's there. And because the city has established a social equity and racial justice commission, I look forward to all of us integrating, cross-pollinating, and coming together at the table to see how we can truly become what Ashland says it is. And so, of course, that's near and dear to my heart, as is housing and developing our economic structure to be able to bring more money to Ashland, into Southern Oregon. And, housing is devastating everywhere, and homelessness.
Right. So, I was doing some research as far, and I saw that you came up through the Emerge campaign. Can you just talk a little bit about, I'm always very interested in as far as like how we developed sort of like the bullpen, I guess, in politics, especially with marginalized groups. Can you just talk about your experience in Emerge and kind of like why programs like that are so important?
Emerge, people said, oh, you could have done it without Emerge. I don't know. Even when you go through Emerge, you graduate, you feel good, you feel ready, you're gonna go out there and go for it. You still, oh, it's like, oh yeah, and then there's that. So it's still opportunities for growth. But the Emerge class was very instrumental because it helped me with, first off, do you really want to do this? It's like having another job. Campaigning is like having another job. And this takes you step by step through the process of even before you start your campaign. What is this going to look like? Who's going to be your little cabinet? Who's going to be in your corner, your team? And how are you going to navigate this? And so it gives you all the tools and the instruments you need to be able to create a team, to be able to know who's on first with this team and who's going to take the lead. Because as someone out there campaigning, my job is to get votes and money. That's it. So whomever that person is, their job is just to get votes and money, and their team takes care of booking the dates and booking the house parties and you have an individual who just takes care of your finances and making sure that everything's recorded on time so there are no penalties, and there's certain guidelines that you have to adhere to. So Emerge, I feel, is very, very instrumental when people decide to step out. And I, for one, I encourage, I can't say enough about Black women stepping up and being seen and going out there and writing the policies and the ordinances that will affect our community. It's so important that we do that now.
Mm-hmm. So kind of with that in mind, what advice would you give to, Black people with an interest in politics, whether it be the city council, the mayor, the school board, kind of et cetera, in sort of in the Rogue Valley, those coming behind you? What would you, from your experience so far, what wisdom can you impart to them?
Well, I will tell you, when I see young Black folks, especially here in Ashland, I tell them the door is open. I open the door. Maybe that's the only reason why I'm here, is to open the door, but the door is open. Now I expect y'all to walk through it. And I cannot encourage enough how important it is, because everything that council makes policies, it affects us, and when you have 6 or 7 people who can affect you, you have to be there. You got to be at that table. If not, my great grandma used to say, a shut mouth don't get fed. So honey, you have to be at that table saying what's on your mind and speaking and having that voice of difference and being that voice for the people. Because if we don't have that, then we just sit ourselves back, and nobody is going to step up for us but us. And there is no better time than the present to make that happen. Because if we don't, Bruce, just look at the world around us. What is it going to look like 5 years from now? What is it going to look like for people who have 5-year-old children who are going to be 10 in 5 years? Or people who maybe they don't even want to have children because they don't want to bring anybody in the world. You know, I can understand that too. And I feel like if now when and we really have got to step up. And I think about where we are in Oregon. Yeah. All over Oregon, not just Southern Oregon, but all over Oregon, because the history is steeped in racism. And this is where I live and my grandchildren come and play.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's actually a great place to kind of wrap up this part of the interview. But yeah, Gina DuQuenne, I want to, thank you again for being on the Blacktastic Adventure and just, again, just imparting wisdom and inspiration, really. Like it's what we need out here. Thank you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the latest videos. Thank you.